Love has always been one of the most mysterious and powerful forces in human life. It has inspired poetry, driven people to madness, and shaped the course of history. But something about love today feels different. Relationships seem more fragile, people struggle to find lasting connections, and despite having more choices than ever, loneliness is at an all-time high. Why does love feel so difficult in the modern world? If you have ever felt that modern relationships lack depth, that dating has become a transactional game, or that love today feels more like an illusion than something real, you are not alone. Philosophers have been grappling with these questions for centuries, and their insights offer a perspective that goes far beyond personal experiences. Love is not just an individual struggle, it is a reflection of the society we live in. Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, Erich Fromm, and even ancient thinkers like Plato all had something to say about love. Each of them explored what it means to connect with another human being, why we long for love, and what happens when love is shaped by culture, expectations, and personal insecurities. But what they all agreed on is that love is not just about emotions, it is about how we define ourselves and our place in the world. Sartre, one of the leading existentialist philosophers, believed that modern love is difficult because we use it as an escape from ourselves. He argued that many people enter relationships not out of genuine connection, but because they fear loneliness, emptiness, or the burden of their own freedom. According to Sartre, we often expect love to complete us, to give our lives meaning and to make us feel whole. But this expectation is a trap. When we demand that another person gives us meaning, we are not loving them, we are using them. Simone de Beauvoir expanded on this idea, especially in her exploration of gender and relationships. She argued that traditional roles in love have created a deep imbalance. Women were often raised to see love as their highest goal, while men were encouraged to pursue their ambitions first. This dynamic, she believed, led to relationships where one person sacrificed more than the other, creating resentment, dependence, and ultimately disillusionment. But today, with these old roles breaking down, many people feel lost. If love is not about fulfilling a role, then what is it about? Erich Fromm, a 20th century psychoanalyst and philosopher, offered a different perspective. He believed that modern love feels empty because we have confused love with consumption. In his book, The Art of Loving, Fromm argued that love today is often treated like a product. We shop for partners, evaluate them based on how well they meet our desires, and discard them when they no longer serve our needs. Love in this framework becomes less about deep connection and more about maximizing personal satisfaction. But this approach is doomed to fail. Why? Because real love is not about getting, it is about giving. Fromm believed that true love requires effort, patience, and a willingness to grow together. But modern society, with its obsession with convenience and instant gratification, has made patience a rare quality. We swipe, we scroll, we seek novelty, but in the process we lose something fundamental: the ability to cultivate deep, lasting bonds. These perspectives help explain why so many people struggle with love today. We want love to be effortless, but true love requires effort. We want love to fulfill us, but no other person can fill the void we feel inside. We want love to be simple, but it is one of the most complex aspects of human existence. But this does not mean that love is impossible. It simply means that we must approach it differently. Instead of looking for love to save us, we must first confront our own fears, insecurities, and expectations. Instead of treating love like a product, we must cultivate it like an art. Instead of searching for perfection, we must embrace imperfection. So, if love feels difficult, if relationships seem unsatisfying, if modern dating leaves you feeling lost, it is not because love itself is broken. It is because the way we approach love has changed, and we have yet to fully understand what that means. If love in the modern world feels like a paradox, it's because we are caught between two seemingly contradictory desires: the need for deep, meaningful connection and the demand for personal freedom. We want to be loved for who we are, yet we also fear losing ourselves in the process. We crave intimacy, but we hesitate to surrender to it. This tension is not a recent development, it has existed throughout history. But the way it manifests today is uniquely shaped by modernity's obsession with autonomy and choice. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that this struggle was inevitable. To love, he argued, is to engage with another consciousness, one that is just as free, unpredictable, and independent as our own. But therein lies the problem. The moment we desire someone, we place them at the center of our world, hoping that they will return the favor. We want to be essential to them, irreplaceable, but the catch is that true love must be given freely. The moment we try to possess it, we risk destroying it. Sartre's vision of love was not romantic in the traditional sense. He saw it as a constant push and pull between freedom and dependency. We long to be wanted, but the weight of someone else's desire can also feel suffocating. Modern relationships often mirror this dilemma. How do we balance independence with intimacy? Erich Fromm, coming from a different perspective, argued that love is misunderstood in the modern world. It is not simply a feeling that happens to us, nor is it a matter of luck or attraction. Instead, it is an art, one that must be practiced, cultivated, and nurtured. In The Art of Loving, he describes how most people approach love as consumers, seeking to acquire the best possible partner, rather than focusing on how to truly love another person. This transactional mindset, he warned, turns relationships into economic exchanges. What can this person offer me? Do they meet my expectations? Could I find someone better? Fromm believed that genuine love requires effort, self-awareness, and an ability to give without immediately expecting something in return. But in a world that prioritizes instant gratification and convenience, the idea of love as an ongoing practice rather than a fleeting emotion is increasingly rare. Friedrich Nietzsche took an even more skeptical view. He believed that love, far from being a selfless act, often disguises a deeper, more primal drive, the will to power. We do not merely love, we seek to elevate ourselves through love, to gain status, to conquer, to affirm our own worth. This, he argued, is why people so often become disillusioned with relationships. They enter into them with expectations of fulfillment, validation, even transcendence, only to find that another person can never fully complete them. Nietzsche saw this as one of the great illusions of love, the belief that it can permanently solve the existential loneliness that all humans experience. This disillusionment is perhaps more relevant today than ever before. Modern dating culture, with its endless options and emphasis on self-optimization, reinforces the idea that love should be a pathway to personal enhancement, rather than an experience in and of itself. This shift in how we approach love has profound consequences. More than ever, people feel isolated despite being constantly connected. The idea that there is always someone better, that commitment is a limitation rather than a choice, makes it difficult to invest deeply in relationships. Zygmunt Bauman, a contemporary sociologist, described this phenomenon as liquid love, a state in which relationships are fluid, disposable, and driven by a consumerist logic. In a world where everything is replaceable, commitment starts to feel like a risk rather than a foundation. But if love has become unstable in modern times, does that mean it is doomed? Or can we redefine it in a way that allows us to navigate its challenges without falling into despair? Love in the modern world is tangled with paradoxes. We crave deep, meaningful connection, yet fear the vulnerability it requires. We desire freedom, but struggle with the idea that true intimacy might demand some form of commitment. Dating apps, social media, and a world of endless options create the illusion that love is just another consumer choice. Yet despite all of this accessibility, loneliness persists. If love is meant to bring us closer, why does it often leave us feeling more isolated than ever? At its core, modern love is shaped by the tension between autonomy and connection. The more we emphasize personal independence, the harder it becomes to fully surrender to another person. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that love is inherently conflicted because it asks us to see the other as both a free subject and an object of our desire. We want someone who is fully themselves, independent, unique, untamed. Yet at the same time, we want them to belong to us, to choose us above all else. The moment we try to possess someone, we risk reducing them to an object, stripping them of their freedom. And yet, if they remain completely free, how can we ever be certain that they won't leave? This fear of uncertainty fuels much of the anxiety we associate with love today. Unlike in the past, where relationships were often dictated by duty, social structures, and economic necessity, modern love exists in a state of flux. We are free to choose, but with that freedom comes a new kind of instability. Zygmunt Bauman described this as liquid love, a form of attachment that is as fluid as it is fragile. In a world where everything feels replaceable, even our relationships take on a temporary quality. Instead of investing in the slow, sometimes painful work of deepening love, we are tempted to trade one partner for another, always chasing the illusion of something better, something more fulfilling. But is this search for the perfect partner really about love, or is it about something else? Søren Kierkegaard argued that much of what we call love is actually an attempt to escape ourselves. He described three modes of existence: the aesthetic, the ethical, and the religious. In the aesthetic life, people seek pleasure, novelty, and excitement, often mistaking infatuation for love. This stage is where many modern relationships begin, and for some where they remain. The ethical stage, in contrast, involves a deeper commitment. One where love is not just about fleeting emotions, but about responsibility, effort, and the willingness to endure, even when the initial spark fades. This is where love becomes difficult, because it forces us to confront not just the imperfections of the other person, but also our own. Love, at its core, is a mirror, one that reflects both our deepest desires and our greatest insecurities. We idealize our partners, projecting onto them the qualities we wish we had, only to later resent them when they fail to live up to these impossible expectations. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this as one of love's great deceptions. Our tendency to romanticize another person, believing they will complete us, when in reality, no one else can bear the burden of giving our lives meaning. And yet, despite all of these complications, we keep searching. Even in the face of heartbreak, betrayal, and disillusionment, we return to love again and again. Why? Perhaps because, as Erich Fromm suggested, love is not merely a feeling, it is an art, a practice, a way of being. To truly love is not to consume another person or to demand that they fulfill our unmet needs, but to nurture, to grow, to act in ways that affirm the life and freedom of both ourselves and the other. If love is not about possession, not about finding the perfect person to complete us, then what is it really? What if the struggle in modern love is not about love itself, but about the way we approach it, about the expectations we place on it, the stories we tell ourselves about what it should be? In a world where we are constantly fed the idea that happiness is something to be achieved, love has become another goalpost, another checkbox in the pursuit of a fulfilling life. We search for the one as if they are a missing puzzle piece, someone who will erase our doubts, heal our wounds, and provide the sense of security we crave. But love does not work this way. As Nietzsche warned, the greatest illusion in love is believing that another person will give our lives meaning. This expectation that love should solve something for us is precisely what makes it so fragile. When we expect love to fix us, to fill the emptiness inside, we put an unbearable weight on the relationship. It is no wonder that so many connections crumble under this pressure. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that love often becomes a power struggle because we are asking the impossible from one another. We want someone to see us completely, to accept us unconditionally, and yet we also want to remain mysterious, free, unbound. We want security and excitement at the same time, and when these desires contradict each other, as they inevitably do, we feel dissatisfied. This dissatisfaction is something Erich Fromm explored deeply in The Art of Loving. He wrote that most people mistake love for a passive emotion, something that simply happens to them. But real love, he argued, is not about falling into something, it is about building something. Love is not a feeling that lasts only as long as passion does. It is an active practice, a discipline, an ongoing effort. And perhaps this is where modern love struggles most. In an age of convenience, where everything is designed for instant gratification, the idea of work, of patience, effort, and long-term commitment can feel almost foreign. This is especially true in an era where alternatives are always within reach. Dating apps have created a paradox. We have more choices than ever before, and yet love has never felt more elusive. The moment a relationship becomes difficult, there is an easy escape. Just swipe, just move on. Zygmunt Bauman's liquid love is fully realized in this digital world, where people hesitate to fully invest because they know there is always the possibility of someone else, someone better. But what if love is not about finding the perfect person, but about choosing someone, choosing them again and again, despite their flaws, despite the struggles? What if love is not about eliminating uncertainty, but about learning to live with it? This is what Soren Kierkegaard meant when he spoke of the leap of faith. Love, like life itself, does not come with guarantees. There is no certainty, no way to predict the outcome. To love is to risk rejection, disappointment, heartbreak. And yet, without this risk, love is impossible. This is why many people retreat from it, not consciously, not in a way that they would admit to themselves, but in subtle ways, through self-sabotage, through endless searching for something more, through keeping one foot out the door just in case. Fear of loss, fear of pain, fear of wasting time. These fears shape modern love more than we realize. But what if these fears are the very things keeping us from experiencing love at all? What if the only way to truly love is to let go, not of the relationship, but of the need for control, for certainty, for guarantees? If love is a leap of faith, if it requires embracing uncertainty rather than resisting it, then what does that actually look like in practice? How do we love in a way that is not weighed down by fear, by expectation, by the illusions that modern culture has placed upon it? One of the hardest truths about love is that it will always be, to some extent, uncontrollable. No matter how deeply we try to understand ourselves or the people we care for, love exists in the space between two constantly evolving individuals. This is why philosophers like Simone de Beauvoir rejected the idea of love as possession. She saw traditional romantic ideals, where one person is meant to complete or define another, as deeply flawed, even dangerous. For Beauvoir, real love was not about ownership or dependence, but about freedom. Love should be a relationship between two whole individuals, not a merging that erases the uniqueness of each person. But freedom in love is not easy. When we truly love someone, we want security. We want to know that they will be there tomorrow, next month, next year. And yet, the more we try to hold on to love, the more fragile it becomes. Sartre warned against the tendency to turn love into a prison, where one partner's needs, desires, or sense of self are sacrificed for the sake of maintaining the relationship. He saw this as a form of bad faith, a self-deception in which people deny their own freedom in order to conform to an ideal. This is the paradox of love. We crave certainty, but love exists in the unknown. We want to hold on to someone, but love can only breathe in space, in freedom. And yet this does not mean that love should be detached, unemotional, or fleeting. If anything, it means that love requires courage. Courage to be vulnerable. Courage to stay, not because we are afraid to be alone, but because we choose to be with this person. Fromm believed that this kind of love, the kind that is an act of will, a commitment to understanding and nurturing another person, is what distinguishes mature love from infantile love. Infantile love says, "I need you, therefore I love you." Mature love says, "I love you, therefore I choose you." The difference is profound. One is based on lack, on dependency, on the idea that without love we are incomplete. The other is based on abundance, on seeing love as something we give rather than something we extract. But modern love has made this harder than ever. Social media has amplified insecurity, making people constantly aware of alternatives, of the relationships others seem to have, of what they themselves might be missing. There is always the illusion that something better is out there, and this prevents people from fully investing in the relationships they already have. It is easier to keep searching than to do the difficult work of real intimacy. This is what Kierkegaard meant when he spoke of despair. Not the obvious kind of despair where we are aware of our suffering, but the subtle kind, the kind that disguises itself as endless distraction. When people cannot sit with their own feelings, when they cannot embrace discomfort, they seek escape. And love, for many, has become just another escape, something to chase rather than something to cultivate. So how do we love without falling into these traps? How do we embrace love without losing ourselves in it? It begins with recognizing that love is not an achievement. It is not a goal to reach, not a prize to be won. It is a process, an ongoing act of creation. And like all forms of creation, it requires attention, patience, and the willingness to let go of rigid expectations. Nietzsche believed that love, like life itself, should be approached with a spirit of creativity. Instead of looking for love to give us meaning, we should bring meaning into love by making it a space for growth, transformation, and deep engagement with another person. But this requires giving up the fantasies we have been taught, the fantasy of perfect compatibility, of effortless love, of passion that never fades. It requires understanding that real love is not about finding the right person. It is about becoming the right person, about building something together that is greater than either individual alone. If modern love is broken, if it is clouded by illusion, fear, and distraction, then how do we rebuild it? What does it mean to love in a way that is both free and meaningful, both grounded in reality and capable of transcending it? One of the first steps is to recognize that love is not something that simply happens to us. Despite the romantic narratives that tell us love is fate, or that we will one day meet the one and everything will fall into place, reality tells a different story. The kind of love that lasts, the kind that nourishes rather than drains us, is not accidental, it is cultivated. Erich Fromm argued that love, much like any art or discipline, requires active participation. In his book, The Art of Loving, he describes love not as an emotion that arises out of luck or circumstance, but as a skill, something that must be learned, practiced, and refined over time. Just as one cannot expect to master a musical instrument or a language without effort, one cannot expect to love well without intention. But what does it actually mean to practice love? For Fromm, it starts with self-awareness. Too often, people enter relationships hoping that love will heal them, that another person will complete them, fill their voids, or erase their insecurities. But love is not a substitute for self-acknowledge. Love, if anything, demands self-acknowledge. It requires us to understand our own fears, our own patterns, and our own capacity for both connection and distance. This is why Sartre believed that love, like freedom, is a responsibility. Many people fear freedom because it means taking ownership of their choices. They prefer to believe that love is something that happens rather than something they create, because this absolves them from the difficult work of confronting themselves. But the reality is that love, at its core, is a confrontation. It forces us to see ourselves through the eyes of another. It forces us to acknowledge our weaknesses, our contradictions, our dependencies, and this can be terrifying. Kierkegaard understood this fear well. He wrote about the anxiety that comes with true intimacy, the knowledge that, in allowing someone to truly see us, we also become vulnerable to rejection, to pain, to loss. And yet this risk is precisely what gives love its depth. Without it, love becomes nothing more than a comfortable illusion, a contract of mutual convenience rather than a true connection between two evolving souls. This is why Nietzsche believed that love should not be a form of possession but a form of creation. He criticized conventional relationships that sought to tame or limit another person. Instead, he saw love as something that should elevate, something that pushes both people toward greater strength, greater understanding, and greater self-overcoming. A love that does not encourage growth, he argued, is not love. It is merely attachment disguised as love. And yet, this kind of love is rare. It requires two individuals who are willing to confront themselves, to remain open to change, and to resist the temptation to fall into complacency. Most people are not willing to do this. Most would rather settle for the idea of love than for love itself, because love itself is difficult. It does not guarantee security. It does not promise that things will always stay the same. This is why modern love in many ways is so fragile. It is built on the expectation of permanence, the illusion that happiness is something we can capture and keep. But as Beauvoir pointed out, true love is not static. It is an ongoing negotiation, a process of adaptation. It requires both independence and connection, both commitment and flexibility. So what does this mean for us in a world where love is so often reduced to convenience, performance, or fleeting excitement? It means that we must rethink our expectations. Love is not something we find. It is something we build. It is not something that erases our fears. It is something that requires us to face them. It is not about completing each other. It is about witnessing and supporting each other in our individual. And perhaps most importantly, love is not about control. It is not about guarantees. It is not about the illusion of certainty. It is about embracing the unknown, about being fully present with another person without demanding that they stay the same, without expecting them to fill the spaces within us that only we can fill ourselves. To love, then, is to live with paradox. It is to desire stability while accepting impermanence. It is to long for connection while respecting distance. It is to surrender to something greater than ourselves while remaining fully ourselves. In the end, the problem of modern love is not just a problem of relationships. It is a problem of how we understand being itself. The world has conditioned us to seek security, to avoid discomfort, to believe that love should be easy and predictable. But the truth is, real love, love that is alive, love that is worth having, is never easy. It is challenging, it is unsettling, it is, at times, terrifying. But it is also the only thing that makes life truly meaningful.